we have a reading today, and this reading just came to me, and I love how inspiration wove it into the message. And my beautiful husband, Will, is going to read the reading for you today.
Okay. This is, I think it's actually called The Road Not Traveled. I'm pretty sure. I'll look it up. But here it is. It's by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.
Thanks, Will. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So today we're gathering around the fire, and the fire is this place of great power and deserving of respect. We don't play with fire. We've heard that since we were kids, right? It represents the inner spiritual light that dwells within each of us. The flame illuminates our path and our purpose. And so paying attention to this inner flame is imperative. And in the dark, cold, wet of winter, we get drawn to the fireplace, the hearth. And the hearth is the floor of the fireplace. It's usually made of stone or brick, and it extends a short distance into the room. And when the fire is lit and you come in from the cold and you get the VIP seat of standing on the hearth, there's no happier place on earth, is there? It's this really sweet spot of heaven that conjures up all of these feelings of warmth and family. And for me, for some reason, joyful expectancy. Like I feel like something's going to happen, Christmas or hot cocoa or something's going to happen. So this also happens on the warm nights of summer under the blanket of stars, and we're called to the campfire, this hopeful place of connection and conversation. And we listen to storytellers and we hear about the moments and the memories that make up our tribe. And we somehow listen differently around the fire. We learn things about ourselves and our life and love while we're cuddled by the smoky scent of burning wood and yesterday's newspaper. And it's dangerous to get complacent around the fire because we need to stay vigilant so that we don't burn things down. And we need to be careful that we continue to not let the fire go weak and go out. We need to learn the balance, the art of stoking the flames. And I believe that the road less traveled leads us to our fire because it takes that conviction to chart your own path and to follow your heart. And I think the reward to that is fresh fire. And the fire has a way of nurturing and illuminating, and then perhaps even destroying, right? You know, destroying even all that's meant to fade and die. And this is, I think, perhaps why we sometimes fear the fire. This is the fire that we long to gather around. This is the fire that shows up as community and warm connections and belonging and stories shared and resources. And it's in the fire, in the dark of night, where we all become equal. You know, when you're sitting around a fire, you can't really even see each other's faces, and you just hear voices, and there's no special spot around the fire. They're all good. It's not like the hearth, you know, where there's a limited space. The fire pit speaks of unconditional love. And just like the fire is fueled by oxygen, the best fires have some space around them, some space for newcomers, for new guests, for surprise visitors. For me, there was once this fire that I gathered around quite often. In fact, I was raised around it. It came in the form of fire water. And I would head to the watering hole and I would drink fire water and I'd smoke fire sticks and I would stir up the conversations and the connections. And that's what I knew to do. But it wasn't too long before I found out that I actually had no tolerance for this type of fire. It left me feeling burnt out. It led me to hours of suffering and conflict. And I saw that there was another path in the woods, but it was the road less traveled. And I didn't know anyone who went down that path. And if I did know them, it was all very secretive. You could almost say anonymous. So I waited at the crossroads for decades until I no longer could stay on my path. And I had to jump tracks and leave the tribe and take this road less traveled. And I have to say, it did make all the difference. To do this, I had to summon some inner fire and conviction. This new path called for surrendering the life that I had known. All that I had once known to be so true about myself needed to be used for kindling for my new life. And to be honest, in looking back, it wasn't much to burn anyhow. There was a death, and then there was darkness, and then I stumbled down this new path and that I had no map for. Maybe you've had this experience. I think it's universal, where we all jump tracks in some way in our lives. Maybe you were headed down to your happily ever after, and maybe you met up with a hard stop and you saw that the road that you were on with your beloved was no longer there for you. And you watched as the bridge that was your marriage begins to crumble beneath your feet. Or maybe there was a refiling of your religious affiliations. I'm sure everybody in this community probably has that, because nobody was born into SpeakEasy. So you had some rethinking to do. You began to notice maybe that the meals that were being served were no longer tasting very good, or sometimes not even digestible, and oddly left you still feeling unfed and still thirsty. So maybe you began to look out past the prefixed menus, and your eyes began to linger on the exit door, until one day you did the bravest thing of all: you stepped out. Or maybe you agreed that somewhere in your youth, maybe you agreed to play a part or take a position in someone else's life plan. And you did it because, well, that's what was expected of you, and you wanted to be nice, and you were told that being nice was nice, and you ended up being nice when you were designed to be extraordinary. And as you grew and you mastered your own understanding of life, you found that the shoes that you had on didn't grow with you, and you were getting blisters trying to fit yourself into this role that was actually never yours to play. And you came to that place where you could no longer accommodate this self-annihilation, and you found yourself wondering, maybe even walking down this new path with no clue of its destination. And this is how we walk through the fire. This is what it looks like to get fired up about your own truth. And this is what it looks like to be purified by fire. You see the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Sacred Heart of Mary, they're lit with flames. These are two examples of people living in the unapologetic conviction of unconditional love. That's hot, but it's not easy. Because as you travel this path of unconditional love, the love includes you. This is the last person we're ever going to want to get on the bus. Everybody else, we'll do it for everybody else, but us, unconditional love includes us. And we begin to see that our happiness is a gift that we give to the world. And maybe you didn't know this. I didn't know this. I thought your happiness was the gift that I gave to the world. I didn't know I was responsible for my happiness. And so on this new path, we begin to strip away all of our unquestioned agreements. And this new path challenges you. There are not many people on this new path, because it's not, it's the road less traveled. And only the most courageous venture out of the comfort zone. So the people on the new path are not zombies. They're fired up in their own conviction. They're not Tupperware ladies dabbling in plastic and aesthetics. They may seem to be tatted up and scarred and maybe a little rough around the edges. And yet the people on this new path, their beauty runs so deep, so deep beneath, beyond the skin. Because they too have found, or have been forced to find, that they need to burn the ships and toss over the people pleasing and the going along to get along. And they've stepped into their conviction. And what's more beautiful than that? So into the night of uncertainty, with only their torch of truth and their faith, they put themselves to the test. And on this new path, the first leg of the journey is rough going. They navigate this dense wood of isolation. It's exciting and it's terrifying. And there's this deep craving for companionship. And our hearts are silently screaming like, is anyone else out here? Has anyone else stopped drinking? Has anyone been divorced or lost a child or lost your faith or lost your mind? Am I all alone? And you hope with all that you have that you hear an echo. And then somehow a friendly voice calls back and says, you're not alone. I don't know about you, but this is the best thing. Like when you hear a voice call out in the dark and say, hey, friend, you're not alone. When you hear that, you can be absolutely sure that you have heard the voice of God. That's what it sounds like. Because prior to that echo, you had your whole alphabet turned upside down. I know I had my whole alphabet turned upside down. I had no idea if I could even navigate the new land and the new language. And I'm sure that you have experienced this. And it's absolutely terrifying and transformative. And yet this isolation and darkness felt, you know that it felt really scary, but you also knew with every thread of your being that there was no way that you could turn back, that you could not attempt to fit yourself back into blister causing shoes, that you just couldn't. And you just decided that you would rather be a stranger in a strange land than an imposter in your own home. So you follow this echo and you find a new fire. And this is sight for sore eyes. Because you feared that that fire was a thing of your past. You thought that you had been excommunicated from the hearth. And you thought maybe that you didn't deserve the warmth of fire. But here you are with your toes to a new flame. And you feel the familiar warmth and the crackle and the pop, and there's voices and murmurs and laughters and ebb and flow and shared stories. And you feel like you're crashed a wedding where you don't know anybody and you think, oh my God, this is so awkward. Like, can I make myself at home here? And your heart is pounding, your feet are heavy, but your soul is thirsting for your community, and you find yourself an empty seat and you seem to have your name written on it, and you settle into this space and you feast your gaze on the holy glow of humanity and shared interests, and you lift your wet eyes to the stars and you give thanks for your good fortune of finding your way back home. That's what fire is. It's the thing that transforms us. And when this happens, when you find yourself back home, that's when your internal flames expand. That's when your internal fire grows because it has been honored and well attended. That's why we see so many people who are not honoring and attending to their internal fire, walking the world like zombies. Last week, Maureen Claffey mentioned how this Zoom experience, how this community felt like a modern day fire. And I love that idea because I feel like we're all standing in this hearth of SpeakEasy. And that just sounds really nice. And what I know is that to gain great benefits from this fire, this community, much was needed to be burned. You had to get past the idea of, I don't like people. I don't need church. I don't like church. I don't like Zoom. I'm better off on my own. Who the fuck is Maureen Muldoon? What the fuck is SpeakEasy? Is this some sort of cult? Oh, but Kathy Richardson? Okay, well, if Kathy Richardson's going to, well, she's going to sing. Okay. And then you started to get stoked up with your fire and said, well, okay, then I'll go. So these are rare and lucky gatherings. Somehow our community, our communal thirst for truth and for connection was greater than our resistance. I know this because I have been the queen of resistance. I have been the queen of resistance, but today I'm the queen of ease. And I want you to know that the reason I called SpeakEasy was sort of a joke, because back in the day, I did nothing easy. I made everything look extra hard. So I get it, I get that to get here in this moment, in our spiritual evolution, in the agreements that we have in our life, in the experiences that we're experiencing, We have had to burn a few bridges and biases and bad habits and blind spots. We have had to do that. I had no idea that that all that I would have to burn. You know, I had to burn the idea that leaving my Catholic church meant leaving my Catholic roots. That was not true. That was not a true idea. So I had to burn that. I did it, and I'm still and forever tethered to my tribe of origin. I had to burn the idea that leaving my religion, I would be leaving my God. That wasn't true. Or that my God would leave me. That was not true. I had to burn that idea that God exists way beyond the ways that I was taught as a child. I had to burn the idea that good girls were quiet and unquestioning. I had to burn my fear of you not loving me if I did not agree with you. I had to burn the idea that I had nothing to say or share. I had to burn down my fear of visibility, low self-esteem. And if that wasn't enough, I had a whole bushel of kindling little illusions and everyday assumptions that needed to be torched along with it all. So there's a saying that says, burn from me all that is not God. This would be a good mantra for us this week. Burn from me all that is not God. If you start to use this mantra, you might see things come up and you might see things fall down. And this is good because you want to be in alignment with your God. Back in the day, farmers used to burn their fields to prepare them for the next harvest. So that's sort of like what we're doing today at the burning bowl. We're going to be burning down anything that's going to get in the way of new growth. Burning the fields would remove the dead plants and help the new plants to come up. These prescribed burns were used to improve the health of the soil. So this is a prescription. It's a prescription to well-being. You might be willing to let go of, you know, the things that you've been dragging around, the dead carcasses and, you know, so ideas. So let go of everything this year and let go of this whole past year where we learned so much through fire. Let go of all of the fears and unforgivenesses. Let go of all of the judgments and the angers and the accusations. Let go of all of the angers and the accusations. Burn all of that, because if you don't burn that, it will burn you. And we've seen people running the world like a witch hunt with their torches, wanting to brand each other. Ugh, we don't want to be that. When we could do so much more with our flame and fire. Let's use that fuel to fire up our possibilities and stay, you know, on the seeds of our future. My husband told me that that when pine cones open, they release their seeds when it's really warm. You know, as it says, it's easy for the seeds to germinate. Some pine cones, like a jack pine, need a hot, fast fire to open and release their seeds. This is called the jack pine ecosystem. I didn't know this. I thought it was interesting. It also sounds kind of sexy to me, you know, to heat things up in order to release seeds. But then everything sounds sort of sexy to me. So, so here's the thing. Here's the main takeaway. We're either going to use our flame to brand each other or get spiritually lit and use our power to light up the world in love. Now's the time to burn all the old crops and add heat to the seeds of our new chapters so that we can stay open to new ideas and innovations and inspirations, because we're the people to do that. Are you brave enough to take it all down to a blank canvas? Are you strong enough to see the silver lining of your torched fields? There's this amazing story about Thomas Edison. He invented the light bulb. He invented the moving picture camera, which I love calling it that, the moving picture camera, because that's when it was just a moving picture camera. It was way before digital. All of that rests on this man's wisdom. So towards the end of his career, what we might have thought was the end of his career, his laboratory exploded into flames, and with much of his life's work. He was 67 at the time. Many might have thought like, okay, good time to pack it in, you know, good time to retire. But instead, the next day he came out and he said, I will start tomorrow and begin again. And he did. And he had two fiery, great more decades in him. Edison acted as a consultant to the Navy in the First World War, but only on defense equipment. And he proudly noted at the end of his life that he never invented a killing machine. that he only used his wisdom to bring good light into the world, that he used his fire for good. He did that at 67, he began again. So what still lives in you? I like to say, in order to grow, we have to let go of all that we are and all that we know, to let your life be pruned to the core of your truth, to step away from anything that does not fully fire you up. Let yourself be guided by this inner flame. In December, we're going to follow the path of the Blessed Mother to Bethlehem, because if there was ever a road less traveled, it was hers, right? I mean, it was her willingness to have her own plans absolutely burned. Who knows what she would have had thought her life was going to be. I'm sure she didn't think like, I'm going to birth Christ. I'm sure that was not on her vision board. I'm sure she didn't rush to God and say, pick me. I want to be the one to tell my fiance that I'm miraculously pregnant. And I want to ride a donkey to Bethlehem and give birth to a child in a manger and then watch him be crucified. Pick me. Let me be that person. I want to play that part, God. When we play the plan of God, we got to burn our little selves and our little plans, because something so much greater for humanity is wanting to be birthed through us. So Mary is this example of someone who took the road less traveled, let the birth of Christ be her legacy. She was a symbol of unconditional love. And this was the moment when she said yes, that a match was struck and a light was lit that literally illuminated the world. This teacher, when you take his teachings as they were designed to be taken, was about unconditional love. He lit the world more audaciously than Edison himself. The fire that we gather around is the same fire that they gathered around in Bethlehem, the fire that called kings and shepherds alike. That fire was called love, love incarnate. There's no greater fire than this. So this holiday season, when we walk with Mary in her devotion to unconditional love, to deliver unconditional love, we'll go into more of that, those miracles that came about because of that decision. But for now, we're going to stay in relationship with our own fire. We're going to stay lit. We're going to join us at the burning bowl if that's a possibility for you. And we're going to entertain the idea of getting down to the core of our truth so that we can step into 2021 fully lit and ready to be used for the highest good of all. And that's the word.
Yay.